Today I'm going to change things up a little bit. Up until now, I've shown you guys resto mods that we've done, taking old cars, adding bells and whistles, modern drivetrain, making them super fun to drive. I'm going to show you the exact opposite. The car I'm going to show you today is a 1957 Corvette convertible. This is an original restoration that we did for a customer in Baraboo, Wisconsin. This was restored to a concourse level, meaning that every part, every nut and bolt has to be identical to the part that was used at the factory in 1957 when it was originally built. This is the other half of what we do. We still do a lot of original restored stuff. There's a lot of purists out there that are still really into the collector side of these vehicles. When it comes to collectability, originality is key. Got a call one day from a guy who said he had an old Corvette that needed some work. We went to check it out and it definitely needed work. This Corvette had sat in a barn since the early 70s. Same owner has had it since the late 60s. He bought it from his college roommate. And so he had the car painted and he was so frustrated with the paint job when he got it back that he stuck it in the barn and it didn't move until we picked it up a couple years ago. So the challenge with these cars is these first generation Corvettes are super low production. There were only about 6,000 of these cars built. In comparison, the full-size Chevrolet passenger cars, they built about 1.5 million of. So anytime you're missing parts for these and you're restoring them to their original glory, locating parts is difficult. So I'll pop the hood and show you a couple things here that we had to locate. When we picked it up, it had a single 4-barrel carburetor. This is how the car left the factory. And so we had to locate an original aluminum intake and dual carburetor setup for this car to make it correct. Another thing I should have mentioned, the customer wanted to have this car judged when it was finished. In doing a concourse restoration, every nut and bolt has to be correct. Every piece of hardware, the head of every screw has to match exactly the way that it left the factory. That's what makes these really challenging to do, is because you can't use just any part to make it work like you can with a lot of resto mods. It has to be identical to the part that was used at the plant in 57. So that creates a lot of challenges. And especially when parts are missing, we really have our work cut out for us. Another really difficult piece we had to find were these aluminum finned valve covers. They are 9-finned valve covers, and Corvette used 9-fin and 7-fin in these C1s. The 7-fin are reproduced and you can buy new ones. The 9-fin are almost impossible to come by, and we were lucky enough to locate a pair of these down in Missouri. They are the correct valve covers for the car, so we really got lucky in finding those. This is the level of detail that's involved when restoring cars to this level. These exhaust manifolds were bolted up to the engine when they were painted originally at the factory. So they were painted orange initially, which eventually burned off. So we had to do the same thing and make sure there was orange overspray on the exhaust manifolds. You can still see a little remnant of it here that hasn't burned off yet. That's one thing that the judges look for to make sure it's authentic to the original build. Another interesting thing about these cars, the grille, these are 13 individual teeth that are mounted to this horizontal crossbar that make up the grille. The really cool thing about those, every tooth is a different size. Every tooth has a different angle to it. So in other words, each one has to go in the right place. It can't be upside down. It can't be side for side. What was fun about this one was when we picked the car up, those were all thrown in a 5-gallon pail. So we had to kind of figure out which was which, and took a little time to get everything lined up the way it was supposed to be. The easiest cars for us to do, and I talk about this all the time, are the cars that drive in and somebody wants the whole car restored, because then we are taking it apart. We can keep track of every piece and what we had to start with and what we didn't. But a lot of times, as was the case with this one, they come in pieces and boxes and bins. And so that's like a giant puzzle, makes it a little more difficult for us to figure out along the way. So every piece was replated. All of these items are original. Now, when I spoke before about low production, there were only 6,000 of these cars built. A lot of the parts are not reproduced. So if you don't have an original, you got to hunt them down, and it can be pretty tricky. Another cool thing, these headlight bulbs. The original headlight bulbs have these little T3 stamps in them. Probably get a close-up of it. These are not reproduced. There are many different T3 bulb varieties that GM used throughout the 50s and 60s. However, this particular one for a 57 Corvette is not reproduced, this design. So we actually found an original pair on a guy's shelf in his garage in California. They still worked, they were still good. Why he hung on to them or had them on a shelf, I have no idea, but they were a godsend for us, because when the car is being judged, those are the things they look for. And almost nobody has original bulbs, functioning bulbs, on these cars anymore today. Another cool thing to touch on here in the interior is these seat covers are unique to 57 with this waffle pattern, which is really cool. Another big thing we had to change on this car was it was originally an automatic, and somebody had put in a 4-speed manual sometime in the 70s, even maybe the 60s. And so we had to locate an original cast iron power glide transmission that was only used for a few years. And because it was being judged and it was a concourse build, we had to find not only a cast iron power glide, but it had to have the correct date code to match the VIN of when the car was built. And that makes it exponentially more difficult. This Corvette has a removable hardtop. These could be ordered in 1957 with a soft top, with a hardtop, or with both tops. This one originally had both tops. However, the owner told us sometime when he had the car early on in the late 60s, someone stole the soft top out of it along with the radio. These soft top frames are very difficult to find. So for now, it's a hard top only car unless we find a good soft top. Speaking of the radio, it's a Wunderbar radio. Corvettes were always a little bit ahead of the time in comparison to other Chevrolets. And so they have a Wunderbar radio. It's like the first version of a Seek style radio. You press the Wunderbar and it will search for the next available channel and stop. Really ahead of its time. And it's a 1 year only, Corvette only radio, this exact design. Well, I mentioned earlier, it was stolen originally, so we had to locate a radio for it, which was also super difficult. And then we had it restored and rebuilt, so it's functioning. Everything on this car works the way it did when it left the factory, runs and drives. It's like a trip back in time. In the trunk here, I told you that we had the car judged, and we've been lucky enough to have several vehicles win gold certification at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. Any of you guys that are into muscle cars or Corvettes, this is a must-see show. It's in the Chicago area in Rosemont every November. I would highly suggest checking it out if you haven't. By far the best indoor muscle car and Corvette show out there. They've got restored original cars, they have unrestored survivors and barn finds, everything in between, and every year they're bringing in new stuff. I can't say enough good things about that show. But when you take a car there to have it judged and certified, it really boils down to having 7, 8 experts, judges that go over the car, and they have the flashlight and they go over every single little category here and column and double check that each one of these parts is correct and the way that it left the factory back in '57. They make little notes, and you start with 1,000 points. They deduct points as they find problems. The objective is to finish with 950 or more out of 1,000 to earn gold. This one we ended up scoring a 985, so we had 15 points deducted. Pretty tough to ever get a perfect 1,000. I don't think we've ever gotten a perfect 1,000. As much as you think you know, somebody always knows more than you. I'll tell you one thing that was interesting that we got deducted for. These spinners on the wheel covers, they are a separate piece. So they're held on with screws from the back. They can be oriented any way and then tightened down. Well, apparently, when you can read the Chevrolet Corvette script, the valve stem opening needs to be directly above that. And so that was incorrect. That's one thing we got docked for. We never knew that. You can see this one is right. Somewhere along the line, that was apart, and it just wasn't put back together exactly the way the factory did. It can get pretty crazy. I know a lot of this stuff is like, man, who cares? Get in it and drive, you know? But there is a big following of purists out there still, and we love doing original cars like this too, because, you know, especially these, they built very few of them. There's only so many original examples still out there. When you can do one this way, it is just as rewarding as the craziest resto mod out there. And you almost have to be a historian when you get into figuring out, you know, every little facet of hardware and parts that went into the car. Hose clamps have to be exactly correct. And so we've done several C1s and C2s and C3s. They're always fun. They're always a lot of work. Super rewarding when you can bring the customer a gold certificate and put a smile on their face. I'll show you here, there is one thing that we left alone that we didn't touch, and that is this NHRA sticker that has been here on the side glass as long as the customers had the car, and just a cool vintage decal that we wanted to leave. There were at least two tire options that were available, black sidewall or white wall, and the white walls have to also be the exact width, and I forget exactly what it is, but it's right down to the 1/8 inch that the judges measure when judging the car. The width of the sidewall, the white wall, has to be exactly identical to the original tires. These are reproductions, of course, of the original tires. This is another item that we were knocked for when we had the car judged, which everyone is. There's nobody rolling in there with original tires from the 50s. But they are identical in appearance to the original tires, with the Firestone in the white wall and the size and the made in the USA and the logo, the tread. Every aspect of them is the original design. However, the judges know they're not originals. There were really only 2 years where Corvette used this body style, 1956 and 1957. They had the single headlights. In '58, they went to dual headlights on each side. So when we took the car to Chicago to have it judged, the owner met us there, which always adds a little bit of pressure when the owner's there and you want to do a good job and want to get the gold certificate. Well, to add just another level of stress, he had his roommates from back in college when he first bought the car back in the early '60s. He had them all fly to Chicago from the cities they are living in now, and they made a weekend out of it. So that added a lot of stress, and luckily it all worked out great. And they had a blast reminiscing and telling stories. And those are the things that really put a smile on everybody's face at the end of the day. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, if you want to check out the complete build process of this car, there are hundreds of photos of the process from the day we picked it up until the day we finished it and had it judged on our website, along with hundreds of other projects, thousands of photos of other builds. And check them out if you get a chance. Hope you like it.